Walter Clayton Jr. is a big-time player.
Said it, I'm golden. Told you I'm shining. Had to break through. Plan perfect timing.
All right, y'all got it. Let's finally do the Walter Clayton Jr. video. So far in our draft series, I've discussed Liam McNeely, Rasheer Fleming, Noah Asenge, Will Riley, and Nick Clifford. But of course, tons of people wanted me to talk about Walter Clayton Jr. So shout out to all of these people, and make sure to drop your comments below of what other prospects you'd like to see me talk about, and I'll be sure to get a video out on them. Now, I gotta be honest, I've waited a little bit to make this video because watching Walter Clayton in the tournament, I really wasn't the biggest fan of him, truthfully, for a couple of reasons. One, I'm not gonna lie to you, it's because, as you can see, I'm a salty, jealous Hurricanes fan, and I'm not afraid to acknowledge that. It's been a rough 20 years being a Hurricanes fan in all sports outside of a couple of years here and there. But anyways, I'm not a Florida Gators fan like a lot of people watching this video. Sorry, not sorry, but I will do my best to be unbiased in this video, because the second reason that I'm not really a big fan of his is because he's not subscribed to the YouTube channel, just like 55% of y'all. Make sure to subscribe to fix that. I do appreciate your support. Let's get back into the video. It's because, yes, he was awesome in the tournament, and I respect the hell out of him for that, because he's definitely got the cojones, but he's an older player, and he's kind of one-dimensional. And truthfully, with the Heat's 20th pick in the draft, I do prefer that they take the higher upside pick. Now, that opinion could change depending on how their Heat roster shakes out, and if they're able to get a win-now guy like Kevin Durant while keeping this pick. Obviously, that could change, but at number 20, I think that's a nice spot to take a higher upside pick. Now, I know yesterday, or in the last video at least, we talked about Nick Clifford, who is an older prospect, and I do like him. He's actually a whole year older than Walter Clayton, but he's a much more versatile player already, and he's way more athletic, and he has a bigger frame. Although at the combine, Walter Clayton actually weighed only 3 pounds less than Nick did, which is good considering he's 3 inches shorter, but he did come in with his official measurements at 6'2" with a 6'4" wingspan, and he was 199 pounds. Of course, he's 22 years old. So a couple of things about his measurements. I do like that he has a positive wingspan, although it's just by 2 inches, but that's a sign that all of the great prospects have, is they have a positive wingspan. Now, that's not to say that if you have a negative wingspan that you'll be a bad player, but just historically, it's not great. I know Tyler Hero is one of the rare cases where it worked out because he is a great player. But being the fact that Hero is one of those guys that has a negative wingspan, you can see how much of the limitations he has on the defensive side. So that is a check in Walter Clayton's box. The fact that he has a positive wingspan. And overall, I don't want to act like his frame is bad, right? He's not as tall, doesn't have as big a wingspan as a guy like Nick Clifford. But, you know, at 6'2" with a 6'4" wingspan, he's not like he's extremely small and skinny like a guy like Jace Richardson is. We haven't made a video on Jace Richardson yet. I probably will get to it, although I'm not his biggest fan just because that's a guy who's very, very small. And he's been linked to the Heat a ton. But the reason that I got a lot of concerns about Jace Richardson is because he's only 6 foot and 178 pounds. So quite a lot smaller than Walter Clayton Jr. So Walter actually played his first 2 seasons at Iona and then his final 2 seasons at Florida, where, of course, he won a championship. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with his stats at this point. Averaged 19 points per game, 4 assists, almost 4 rebounds a game. But it's the efficiencies that really get people excited. 45% from the field, but 39% from 3 on 8 attempts, which is really great. But where the numbers really pop out at you is in the tournament. Of course, in their 6 games while they were on their run to win the whole thing, he averaged 22 points per game on 47% from the field and 44% from 3. And that's, again, on almost 8 attempts. That is phenomenal efficiency. And I do want to note that one of the reasons why, if I wanted to be positive about Walter Clayton, I could be. I am a guy that puts a lot of stock into how guys perform in the tournament, because to me, that's a huge stage. Or obviously, it's a huge stage, but if you can perform on that stage, I think it's a great sign that when you get into the NBA, you also have the mindset to perform on that stage as well. Because obviously, you know, one of the biggest ifs about a college player transitioning to the league is the mental side of it. Do they have the balls to perform in front of millions of people watching on TV every single night? There's no doubt in my mind that Walter Clayton Jr. has that kind of mindset, and I think that's very, very important, especially as Heat fans. I think back to what Dwayne Wade did in the tournaments. I mean, I guess I wasn't watching it. I was only like 4 years old when he was in the tournament, but you listen and you learn about all these things D-Wade did in the tournament. And then, of course, when he was in the NBA, he just became a big-time player who never shied away from the moment. And that really started back at Marquette. So that's probably the biggest check in Walter Clayton's box. So while a lot of people are high on him, most of the mocks do have him going after the Miami Heat's 20th slot. I think the only one that had him ahead of us was CBS, who had him at number 18. But NBA Draft.net had him at 27. Both Bleacher Report and The Ringer had him at 25. Yahoo also had him at 27. And then Tankathon had him at number 25. I saw a lot of player comps. Obviously, most of them are smaller guards. But none of these guys are really similar, so I don't think anybody really has a great grasp on what he will become. I saw Cameron Payne, who he likes to do a lot of off-the-dribble threes, not so much catch and shoot, although a little bit. I saw Peyton Pritchard, who, although he's very small, I think he's probably a better defender than Walter Clayton could ever be. Same thing with Cole Anthony. Fred VanVleet is a way better facilitator than I think Walter Clayton would ever be. And then I saw a couple of scorers like Ben Gordon, Jordan Clarkson. If that is Walter Clayton's peak, then that's a really good player, because obviously Clarkson's been in the league for a long time as one of the best six men, and Ben Gordon was an absolute sniper back in his day. The last comparison that I saw that actually kind of really turned me off about Walter Clayton is, I swear, from NBA Draft.net, I saw a Tyler Johnson comparison, which, listen, I love Tyler Johnson. He was great for the Heat for a while. But when he got that $50 million contract because the Heat matched the offers by the Brooklyn Nets, that's when we started to sour on Tyler Johnson a little bit as a Heat fan base. So great player, but a little bit of the PTSD just from that whole contract situation. And truthfully, I don't even see the comparisons between TJ and Walter Clayton, just because Johnson was so athletic. The Heat used to sell shirts saying Tyler Johnson will dunk on you. Walter Clayton is not dunking on anybody. But now let's move on to some of his strengths and weaknesses. Once again, we're taking these from Kevin O'Connor on his Yahoo article, but I'll also share my own opinion through my separate research and highlight watching. So the first strength they have is obviously, well, almost all his strengths are shooting, but they break it down a little bit. The first one is his shooting versatility. They say there isn't a shot that he isn't comfortable taking. That sounds a lot like Terry Rozier and Tyler Hero to an extent. So I'm not sure I love that shot. You appreciate the confidence, but you want a guy to take smart shots. But maybe for him, everything's a smart shot, because it says that he's very good firing off handoffs, over ball screens, rising off balanced at the end of the shot clock. These are all things that also kind of are comparable to the shot diet of Duncan Robinson, and one of the things that makes Duncan such a lethal shooter. It's not just that he can get him in the hoop, it's that he can get him in the hoop in multiple ways, and that's why guys really haven't been able to stop Duncan Robinson from shooting. You know, if you're just a corner specialist, you could have a guy sit in the corner and shadow you and not play help coverage. But if you are constantly moving without the ball, there's always a way to adjust, and whether it's getting off screens, that will allow you to get your shot off. So it is good to hear that Walter Clayton is very good off the ball. It also mentions another strength is shot creation. So it says he has basically the handle, or he can be a guy that should give a grenade at the end of a shot clock, and he has that dribble package to sort of get his own shot up. But to me, that strength is basically the same thing as the first strength, which is shooting versatility. And then the next strength they have is it just says clutch. Says he's immune to pressure. Of course, he hit that crazy three-pointer late in that win versus UConn. He also had that wild three in the Elite Eight while he was dribbling away from the basket. So those are all his strengths, that they had in the article. So just to sum it up, they're basically all shooting related, which kind of goes back to my initial concerns of him being a one-dimensional player. But let's look at some of the weaknesses here. The first one they say is defense. It says he loses focus, blows assignments, not a strong on-ball defender. All of those things are quite literally the opposite of Heat culture, or at least what Heat culture is supposed to be. We know at this point, culture is more of a marketing strategy and a brand than actually meaning something. but I would like to see the Heat trend back in that direction so they're not giving up 138 points in an elimination game at home like they did against the Cleveland Cavaliers. I think the Heat maybe got a little bit too far away from that culture toughness mindset, and I would kind of like to see them go back in that direction with guys like Davion Mitchell. So I don't love the fact that Clayton isn't great, with the defensive stuff there. It also says he's not a good playmaker, can't be trusted to be a decision maker, sometimes throws the ball away because he lacks visions to read defenders. If you are that great a shooter, when guys are closing out at you, you're going to want to be able to drive and kick, find the open man if you start getting double teamed. It's not a positive sign for him going forward that he's not a great playmaker. Also, it says another weakness is at rim finishing. Another thing that's bad to be if you're a shooter, because when guys close out, if you want to drive and kick, maybe the defender won't help off the shooters in the corner because they don't trust you to make a layup at the rim. That's the case with Walter Clayton. He was only 51% conversion rate on his layups. Just not good at all. It's not great. He lacks explosiveness. He's a below-the-rim finisher, and he's not great at finishing through contact. Although he is 200 pounds at 6'2", decent frame as far as width, but just doesn't really have that he doesn't really like to look for contact when driving in the paint. So based off everything that I've seen in the tournaments, I agree with all these strengths and weaknesses that Kevin O'Connor listed. That's why, to be honest, I don't really love Walter Clayton for the Miami Heat because I don't see the fit. A lot of the people that do love would like the Heat to take him is they say that he can be the Duncan Robinson replacement. Of course, Duncan is on the last year of his $19 million deal, but if the Heat were to cut him, he's only actually due $9 million. So they could shave $10 million off their salary cap just by cutting him. That means that he's also a valuable contract to trade to another team. So I think the odds of Duncan Robinson not being on this team next year are actually pretty high. But I don't really think that Walter Clayton is the answer to that. Because, yes, he does a lot of similar things shooting-wise as Duncan Robinson does. But if you look at all the weaknesses of Walter, it said defense, playmaking, and at-rim finishing. Well, Duncan does two of those three things pretty well. Obviously, defensively, he's not great. He gets called for fouls a lot, although I do think he was better last year than in previous seasons. But his playmaking is really good. We talk all the time about that dribble handoff between him and Bam Adebayo. And sometimes his pick and roll passing is great also. They just have such a great connection where if the defense commits to Duncan, he can find the roll man going to the rim. He can find the open shooter in the quarter. He is a very smart playmaker. And then his at-rim finishing, you might not believe it, consistently year after year, he is one of the best finishers at the rim in terms of conversion rate. I remember one year he was like literally number one. He was at like 90% at the rim. And I know that's because the volume wasn't super high, but still, he is a shooter, but gets to the rim when the defense close out, and he's able to finish. You have to be able to do that at the next level in the NBA, and that's something Duncan Robinson does, and Walter Clayton just really doesn't. So if you're going to take the older prospect, I much prefer Nick Clifford. And again, that's if he's available, because Nick was mocked at 20th in the draft at the low end. There's a reason a lot of mocks had him higher, some even late lottery. So the reality is at number 20, for the Heat, it's not a great pick. So sometimes you might have to settle for a guy like Walter Clayton Jr., even though I would much rather have Nick Clifford. But if the Heat were to get Clayton, I guess he could help with some bench scoring. Obviously, the Heat didn't get the bench scoring they needed this last season from Terry Rozier and Jaime Jaquez. Those were supposed to be the guys that were going to kind of carry the bench unit. So I guess Walter Clayton could do that in a Jordan Clarkson type role, but he could never play next to Tyler Hero in a million years. And at the end of the day, you can always find a guy who could shoot the basketball. So I don't really think it's worth the Heat wasting a first-round pick to get that type of guy. Because the Heat always do it. Think about Duncan Robinson. Think about Max Strus. Think about Cole Swider. Remember the amazing Swider, man? Man was like 50% from three in the summer league. He could shoot his ass off and not play defense. That's what Walter Clayton does. So there's really no point in wasting a first-round pick when you can get a guy like that. Even in this draft, there's a guy in the second round named Kobe Brea, he's a projected second-round pick. He looks amazing, and he's 6'6", and he's from Kentucky. So there's not any concerns there in terms of who he played against or even his size. And at Kentucky last year, he shot 44% from three on 6 attempts. So maybe the Heat could even trade down, get some more assets, and instead of taking Clayton at 20, take Kobe Brea early in the second round. I would much prefer that if I was the Miami Heat. But let me know all y'all thoughts down below. Do you actually like Walter Clayton Jr., or are you just a Gators fan and you would like to see him continue his career in South Florida? Let me know what y'all think down in the comments below. Make sure to like the video and subscribe because all your support is greatly appreciated. And I'll see you on the next one. Peace out, everyone.
Look, pull up in your city tryna get that dead face. Do it on my own, I don't need no dead weight. Had to kill him off, yeah, I need a head space. You know this homegrown bitch don't offend me.